Captain Marcus Cole knew his ship better than he knew himself. And after 7 years of running cargo through the outer reach, he could tell when something was wrong just by listening to the way the metal groaned and the engines hummed. So when he heard breathing in Cargo Bay 3, soft and steady and definitely not mechanical, he grabbed his old plasma pistol and moved through the dark corridors with silent steps. The emergency lights cast everything in dim red, making shadows dance between the stacked shipping containers. And Marcus felt his heart beat faster as he got closer to the sound. He found her curled up in a small space between two large crates, her body wrapped in a torn cloak that did nothing to hide the scales covering her skin. Copper and gold catching the light like precious metal come to life. She was humanoid, mostly, but horns curved back from her temples in elegant spirals, and the long tail was wrapped around her legs for warmth. And when her eyes snapped open at the sound of his boot on the deck, he saw they were amber with slit pupils like a cat or a snake. "Do not shoot," she said, and her voice was softer than he expected, almost musical despite the fear in it. "Please. I mean, you no harm." Marcus did not lower his weapon because he had not survived this long by being trusting, and he kept his aim steady as he spoke. "You want to tell me how you got onto my ship and what exactly you are? Because I have been hauling cargo for a long time, and I have never seen anything like you." "My name is Cirith," she said, as she rose slowly from her hiding spot, keeping her clawed hands visible where he could see them, moving with a careful grace that reminded him of a predator trying not to spook its prey. "I am Drakenai, and I have been following you for 23 standard days." "Following me," Marcus repeated, his grip tightening on the pistol. "Why would you follow a cargo hauler across the outer reach for 3 weeks? She tilted her head in a way that was almost bird-like, studying him with those strange amber eyes like she was trying to see inside his skull. "Because you are the human who saved the younglings on Current Station," she said, and her voice grew warmer as she spoke. "You are the one who walked into a slaver compound alone and walked out with 42 children. And my sister's daughter was among them." Marcus felt his stomach clench at the memory because that job had nearly killed him. And he still had the scars on his chest and back from the fighting. And he still woke up some nights hearing the screams. "That was 6 months ago," he said carefully. "And I did not do it for thanks or reward." "I know," Cirith said, and she took a single step closer, her tail unwinding from her legs and swaying gently behind her. "That is precisely why I am here, because my people do not forget debts. And when word reached my clan of what you had done, I was sent to find you and observe you and determine if you were worthy." "Worthy of what?" Her lips curved into something that was not quite a smile, something older and more knowing, and the scales on her cheeks shifted color slightly as her expression changed. "Worthy of an alliance," she said. "The Drakenai have watched humanity spread across the stars for 300 years. And you are not what we expected, because yes, you are violent and chaotic and short-lived. But you are also capable of tremendous compassion and sacrifice. And you fight for those who cannot fight for themselves even when there is nothing to gain." Marcus snorted and finally lowered his weapon, though he kept it in his hand just in case. "I am just a cargo hauler trying to make enough credits to keep flying," he said. "There is nothing special about me." "No," Cirith said firmly, and she closed more of the distance between them until she was close enough that he could feel warmth radiating from her scaled skin. "You are far more than that, Captain Cole. And I believe somewhere deep down you know it too." Before Marcus could think of a response to that, the ship's proximity alarm screamed to life, filling the cargo bay with flashing lights and a wailing siren that made his teeth hurt. He ran for the bridge with Cirith close behind him, her clawed feet clicking against the metal deck as she matched his pace easily. And when he reached the controls and pulled up the scanner display, his blood went cold. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, and they were arranged in a hunting formation that left no escape routes. And their identification signatures made his stomach drop. "Syndicate," he growled, recognizing the symbols on the tactical display. 3 hunter-killer vessels. Probably 90 hostiles between them. "They have been hunting me since I left Recognize Space," Cirith said. And her voice had changed, growing harder and colder. And when Marcus glanced at her, he saw that her pupils had narrowed to razor-thin slits. "I thought I had masked my biosignature well enough, but they must have better sensors than I anticipated. Why would the Syndicate be hunting you?" Marcus demanded as he started powering up the ship's meager defensive systems. "Who exactly are you?" Cirith flexed her fingers, and flames danced across her knuckles. Actual fire that burned without fuel and cast dancing shadows across her face. "I'm the daughter of the Ember Throne," she said simply, "a princess of the Draconai. And there are powerful people who would pay a fortune for a dragon in chains." The comm system crackled and a cold voice filled the bridge, demanding their surrender and promising the resistance would be met with lethal force. Marcus looked at the tactical display, showing 3 warships against his 1 battered cargo hauler. And then he looked at the Dragon Princess standing beside him with fire in her hands and determination in her eyes. A grin spread across his face. The same grin that had preceded every terrible decision he had ever made. "Can you fight?" he asked her. "In atmosphere? With air to feed my flames, I could reduce those ships to slag," she said. "But in the void of space, I am far less effective. Then we let them come to us," Marcus said as he began powering down systems one by one, making the ship look dead and helpless. "They want you alive, which means they will not destroy us, and they will think a lone cargo hauler is easy prey." "That is insane," Cirith said. But there was something like excitement in her voice. "That is Tuesday," Marcus replied. "Now let me tell you something about humans that you might not have learned in your 3 weeks of watching me from the shadows." He turned to face her fully, and his eyes were hard as steel. "We are really, really good at violence. And anyone who comes onto my ship without an invitation is going to learn that lesson the hard way." Cirith stared at him for a long moment, and then she laughed, a warm, crackling sound like a fire coming to life. "I think I am going to enjoy this alliance," she said. "Me too," Marcus admitted. "Now let us get ready to welcome our guests." The 3 Syndicate ships moved into position around the wandering star like wolves circling a wounded deer, cutting off every possible escape route with cold precision. And Marcus watched them on his screens while pretending to be terrified over the comm channel. "Please," he begged, letting his voice crack and shake. "I am just a cargo hauler. I do not want any trouble. Take whatever you want, but please do not hurt me." The Syndicate commander laughed, a cruel sound that made Marcus want to punch something, and demanded they prepare for boarding and offer no resistance. "Excellent acting," Cirith whispered from the shadows of the bridge where she was hidden from the video feed. "Years of practice." Marcus muttered back as he cut the transmission. "Now here is the plan. Because those corridors out there are narrow and only 2 people can fight side by side at most. Which means their numbers mean nothing if we control the choke points." He pulled up a schematic of the ship and showed her the layout, pointing to the airlock where the boarding party would cut through, and the series of corridors they would have to navigate to reach the bridge. "They will expect a scared merchant hiding in a closet somewhere," Marcus explained as he moved to a storage locker and started pulling out weapons. "They will not expect a human who grew up fighting and a dragon princess with fire in her veins." Cirith watched him check and load an old projectile weapon and strap various tools to his belt. Things that were not weapons, but could become weapons in the right hands. And her expression shifted to something like curiosity. "Your species does not have claws or scales or natural armor," she observed. "You are soft and fragile and slow compared to many races. So how did you become so good at combat?" Marcus smiled grimly as he handed her a tactical vest that would at least provide some protection. Because we had to be, he said. Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever reached the stars. And we got very creative about finding ways to kill things that were bigger and stronger and faster than us. And that creativity carried over when we met alien species. You adapted, Sirith said with understanding in her voice. We always do. The sound of cutting torches hitting the airlock echoed through the ship. And Marcus took position in the main corridor with his weapons ready, while Sirith moved to a side passage where she could flank anyone who got past him. One more thing, Marcus called softly to her. When humans fight, we do not follow rules or honor codes. We fight to win by whatever means necessary. So do not be shocked by anything you see me do. I have lived for 300 years, Sirith replied. And there was amusement in her voice. I doubt you can shock me. The airlock blew open and Syndicate soldiers poured through, heavily armed and armored and confident in their numbers. Expecting easy prey, they found Marcus Cole, standing in the corridor with a welding torch in one hand and an industrial nail gun in the other. And behind him, the air shimmered with heat as Sirith let her power build. Welcome aboard, Marcus said cheerfully. This is the part where I tell you that you have made a terrible mistake. The lead soldier raised his weapon and Marcus moved. He was not graceful or elegant like the Drake and I, but he was fast and brutal and utterly without mercy. And he used every dirty trick humanity had developed across millennia of warfare. Welding torch became a weapon when he jammed it into the gap in the first soldier's armor and triggered the flame. And the nail gun punched through visors and joints with sickening accuracy. And when he ran out of nails, he used the tool itself as a club. Narrow corridor became a killing ground where the Syndicate's numbers meant nothing. Because only 2 or 3 could engage him at once, and he made every one of them pay in blood. And then Sirith joined the fight and everything became fire. Flames roared through the corridor like a living thing, hungry and devastating, and the recycled air of the ship fed her power until she burned like a small sun. And soldiers who had been advancing confidently suddenly found themselves facing an inferno. She fought with claws and tail and teeth as well as fire. Ancient instincts guiding her movements as she tore through anyone who got close. And the heat coming off her scales was intense enough to blister skin at a distance. Marcus and Sirith fought back to back when the corridors allowed it, covering each other without words, moving together like they had trained for years instead of meeting only hours ago. Duck, Marcus shouted. And Sirith dropped without hesitation as he fired over her head and took down a soldier who had been about to shoot her from behind. Left, Sirith called. And Marcus pivoted as she sent a stream of fire past him to engulf 3 enemies who had been flanking from a side. Passage, the battle raged through the ship for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. And by the time they reached the airlock where the boarding craft was docked, the deck was littered with bodies, and the walls were scorched black from dragon fear essivant. Syndicate soldiers lay dead or dying, and the survivors were scrambling back to their ships, screaming into their cums about the demon and the madman and begging for extraction. Marcus sealed the airlock and leaned against the wall, breathing hard, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead and several smaller wounds across his arms and chest. Sirith stood nearby, her scales still flushed deep crimson from the heat of battle, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. And she was staring at him with an expression he could not quite read. You are completely insane, she said finally. Probably, Marcus admitted with a tired grin. You killed 14 of them with hand tools and improvised weapons. You got the other 3, so it was a team effort. She laughed, that warm, crackling sound he was starting to enjoy, and stepped closer to him. Close enough that he could feel the warmth still radiating from her body. I have fought many battles in my long life, Sirith said softly. I have stood beside warriors of many species. but I have never fought with anyone who could match my pace and ferocity the way you did. Is that a compliment? It is the truth, she said, and her clawed hand reached up to touch his cheek. Surprisingly gentle, despite the weapon she had just used to kill. My people were right about humans. You are exactly what we have been searching for. And what is that? Allies who understand that some things are worth bleeding for, Cirrus said. Partners who will stand beside us not because it is safe or profitable, but because it is right. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the remaining syndicate ships retreating, their engines flaring as they fled back towards safer space. But he knew they would return eventually with more ships and more soldiers. They will be back, he said. Yes, Cirrus agreed. And when they come, I would like you to be standing beside me again. Marcus looked at her. This strange and beautiful creature from an ancient race, who had chosen him for reasons he still did not fully understand. Tell me more about this alliance your people want, he said. Cirrus smiled, and for the first time it reached her amber eyes and made them glow like banked coals. I thought you would never ask. The journey to Draconai Prime took 3 weeks through the darkest parts of space, avoiding trade routes and populated systems where the Syndicate might have spies watching for them during those weeks. Marcus learned more about Cirrus's people than any human had ever known, and she learned about humanity in ways that her distant observation had never taught her. We are an old race, Cirrus explained one evening as they sat in the small galley of the Wandering Star, sharing a meal that Marcus had cooked from the ship's basic supplies. The Draconai were flying between stars when your ancestors were still learning to make fire. And for a long time, we believed ourselves to be the greatest civilization in the galaxy. What happened to change that? Marcus asked. Genuinely curious. We stopped growing, Cirrus admitted, and there was sadness in her voice. We became comfortable with what we had achieved and stopped reaching for more. And while we stagnated, younger species rose and spread and grew powerful. She told him about the hegemony, a coalition of aggressive species who had seen the Draconai's isolation as weakness and had been pushing into their territory for decades, taking planets and resources that had belonged to her people for millennia. There are perhaps 80 million Draconai in all the galaxy, Cirrus said, against the hegemony's trillions. Our power means nothing if we cannot find allies willing to stand with us. So you went looking for friends. We went looking for warriors, she corrected gently. And when we studied the younger species, humanity kept catching our attention. Because you are so strange and contradictory and fascinating. Marcus laughed at that because he had never thought of humans as fascinating. Just stubborn and sometimes stupid. What made us so interesting? Cirrus leaned forward, her amber eyes bright with something that might have been wonder. You are violent beyond reason, she said. Your history is written in blood and war and conquest. And yet you are also capable of tremendous kindness and sacrifice. And you will throw away your lives for strangers without hesitation. That sounds pretty normal to me. It is not normal, Cirrus insisted. Most species are logical about self-preservation. They calculate risks and benefits before acting. But humans charge into danger for abstract concepts like justice and honor and love. She reached across the table and took his hand, her scaled fingers warm against his skin. When I learned what you did at Karath Station, I knew you were exactly the kind of human my mother needed to meet, she said softly. Because any species that produces individuals willing to die for children they have never met is a species worth knowing. Marcus did not know what to say to that. So he just held her hand and let the moment stretch between them. Draconai Prime emerged from hyperspace like something out of a dream. A world of volcanic mountains and crystal. Seas where cities of black stone and golden metal clung to cliff faces that stretched up into amber clouds, and the dragons were everywhere. Marcus stared through the viewport as massive creatures soared through the sky, their wingspans wider than his ship, their scales gleaming in colors he did not have words for. And he felt very small and very human in a way he had not felt since leaving Earth. "Those are the elders," Cirrus said, watching his reaction with amusement. "The oldest and largest of our kind, who have lived so long that they have forgotten how to take humanoid form. They are magnificent. Wait until you meet my mother." The Empress of the Draconi held court in a palace carved from a single mountain of obsidian, and Marcus had to fight to keep his jaw from dropping as he walked through halls filled with treasures older than human civilization. Cirith had dressed him in the finest clothes the ship could provide, which was not saying much, but she assured him that her people cared more about actions than appearance. The court was full of Draconi in their humanoid forms, all of them watching the human stranger with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. And Marcus could feel their eyes on him like physical weight. And then the Empress arrived. Bellatrix of the Ember Throne was the most impressive being Marcus had ever seen. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales like molten copper and eyes that burned with inner fire. And when she looked at him, he felt like she was seeing every secret he had ever kept. She circled him slowly while the court watched in absolute silence, examining him from every angle like a collector appraising a potential purchase. "You are small," Bellatrix observed finally, her voice deep and resonant like distant thunder. "Soft and fragile with no scales or fire or wings to protect you." Marcus knew he should probably be humble and respectful, but something in him refused to bow. "No, ma'am," he said clearly, making sure his voice carried through the silent chamber. "I just have stubbornness and bad ideas. But those have kept me alive this long." A ripple of shocked hisses went through the assembled Draconi, because apparently humans did not speak so casually to the Empress. But Bellatrix's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "My daughter tells me you killed 17 Syndicate warriors with hand tools when they tried to take her from your ship." 14, actually," Marcus said. "She got 3 of them herself. She also says you did not hesitate or try to calculate your odds of survival. You simply fought without question. They boarded my ship without permission." Marcus shrugged. "Where I come from, that deserves a response." Bellatrix was silent for a long moment, those burning eyes fixed on his face, and Marcus refused to look away even though every instinct screamed at him to submit. Then the Empress threw back her head and laughed, a sound like a great forge roaring to life that echoed off the obsidian walls and made the flames in the braziers dance. "Now I understand why my daughter is so fascinated by you. Human," Bellatrix said when her laughter faded, and there was warmth in her voice that had not been there before. "Very well. We will hear thoughts on this proposed alliance. I am just a cargo hauler," Marcus said. "I cannot speak for all of humanity." "Perhaps not," the Empress acknowledged. "But you can speak to what humanity is capable of. And that is what I need to know before I commit my people to this path." She settled onto her throne, a massive chair carved from dragon bone and studded with gems, and gestured for Marcus to approach. "Tell me, Captain Cole, why should the Draconi ally ourselves with your kind? And what do you believe humans can offer us that we do not already possess?" Marcus took a deep breath and thought about everything Cirith had told him, about the hegemony and the threat they posed and the desperate need for allies. "Because we are not afraid," he said finally. "Because when humans see something that needs doing, we do it regardless of the odds. And because we have spent our entire existence fighting against things that should have destroyed us, and somehow winning anyway." He looked around the magnificent hall, at the ancient treasures and the powerful beings watching him. "You need warriors who will not run when the fighting gets hard," Marcus continued. "And humans have never been good at running. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. And that is not something you can buy or negotiate for." Bellatrix studied him for another long moment, and then she nodded slowly. "Perhaps there is hope for this alliance after all," she said. Stay with us, Captain Cole, and let us see what humans and Draconai can build together. Cirith caught his eye from across the chamber, and her smile was bright enough to rival the flames. The months that followed were the strangest and most wonderful of Marcus Cole's life. He became an unlikely ambassador, traveling back and forth between human space and Draconai Prime, carrying messages and building relationships that had never existed before between two such different species. The Human Confederacy was skeptical at first because ancient alien dragons sounded like something from old Earth stories. But when a Draconai diplomatic delegation arrived on Mars and demonstrated their fire-breathing abilities at a welcoming ceremony, skepticism quickly turned to awe and excitement. Humanity had always dreamed of dragons, and now they knew those dreams had been real all along through it all. Cirith remained at Marcus's side. What had started as duty and observation had become something neither of them had words for. Something that grew stronger with every shared meal and late-night conversation, and dangerous. Situations survived together. Marcus found himself thinking about her constantly when they were apart, missing the warmth of her presence and the sound of her laugh. And he caught himself smiling for no reason when he remembered things she had said. "My people will talk," Cirith said one evening as they orbited a neutral station during a break in negotiations. A princess of the Ember Throne spending so much time with a human is already causing rumors. "Does that bother you?" She turned to face him, and there was vulnerability in her amber eyes that he had rarely seen before. "I am trying to determine if it bothers you," she admitted. "Humans have complicated feelings about relationships between species, and I would understand if you found the idea uncomfortable." Marcus reached out and took her hand, marveling as he always did at how her scaled fingers fit perfectly between his. "Cirith, you are brilliant and terrifying, and you have saved my life at least 6 times in the past 4 months," he said. "If anyone has a problem with us being together, they can take it up with me directly." "Together," she repeated softly, and the words seemed to mean something more coming from her. "Is that not what this is? I have lived for 300 years. "Marcus," she said, and her tail curled around his ankle in a gesture he had learned was deeply intimate among her people. "I have seen empires rise and fall and stars die, but I have never felt like this before." She moved closer until they were almost touching, and her breath was warm against his face. "Humans feel everything so intensely," she continued, "so quickly and completely. And it is overwhelming to someone who is used to taking centuries to make decisions." "That is kind of our thing," Marcus admitted. "We do not have thousands of years to take things slow, so we experience everything at full intensity while we can. It seems inefficient." "It is alive," Marcus said. "And I would rather feel too much for a short time than feel nothing for an eternity." Cirith pressed her forehead against his in a Draconai gesture of deep trust, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me to feel like a human." The kiss that followed was fire and tenderness, scales and skin. Two hearts from different worlds, finding something universal in the space between stars. Marcus had kissed people before, but nothing had ever felt like this. Like coming home to a place he had not known existed. They stayed wrapped in each other's arms for a long time, not speaking, just existing together in a way that felt more meaningful than any words could express. But the galaxy does not stop for love. And 3 days later, everything changed. The message came while Marcus was on Draconai Prime, finalizing details of a trade agreement that would benefit both species. The Hegemony had launched a massive fleet toward Draconai space, thousands of warships carrying millions of soldiers, and their trajectory led directly to Draconai Prime itself. Marcus watched Cirith's face harden when she heard the news, watched the warmth drain from her eyes and be replaced by cold determination, and he felt his own anger rising in response. The Council of Flames erupted into chaos, with different factions shouting, Different strategies, some called for surrender, because the numbers were simply too overwhelming to fight. Others demanded a glorious last stand that would be remembered for eternity, even if they all died. And some quietly suggested abandoning Draconite Prime and fleeing to darker corners of the galaxy where the hegemony might not follow through it all. Empress Bellatrix sat in silence on her throne, her burning eyes fixed on the human standing beside her daughter. Finally, she raised one hand, and the chamber fell silent. "We have spent months discussing alliance with humanity," Bellatrix said, her voice carrying easily through the vast hall. "We have debated and negotiated and planned. But now the test comes at last." She looked directly at Marcus, and he felt the weight of her attention like a physical force. "What would humanity do?" "Captain Cole," she asked, "in the face of such overwhelming odds, what would your people choose?" Every Draconite in the chamber turned to look at him, and Marcus felt the crushing pressure of representing his entire species. In a single moment, he thought about Earth's history, about all the times humanity had faced extinction and refused to give up. Thought about the soldiers who had stood against impossible odds throughout the ages, not because they were certain of victory, but because surrender was simply not acceptable. He thought about Cirith and the future they might have together if they survived. "We would fight," he said, and his voice was steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. "Not because we are certain we can win, but because some things matter more than survival. Because honor and family and the right to exist on our own terms are worth dying for." He looked at Cirith, who was watching him with fierce pride in her eyes. And then back at the Empress. "Call your clans and light your forges," Marcus said. "Prepare your warriors and your ships for battle. And let me call home, because I think the Human Confederacy will want to be part of this. You believe your people will come to fight for us?" Bellatrix asked, and there was something like hope in her voice. For a species they barely know, against an enemy that outnumbers them 1,000 to 1, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The same smile he always wore before doing something incredibly stupid. "Your Majesty, you have clearly not spent enough time studying humans," he said. "We have been waiting for a fight like this since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. And if you are wrong and they refuse, then I will fly the wandering star into battle alone." Marcus said simply, "Because this is my family now. And humans do not abandon family." Cirith moved to stand beside him and took his hand in front of the entire court, declaring without words where she stood and who she had chosen. Empress Bellatrix looked at them for a long moment, and then she rose from her throne and spread her arms wide. "Send word to every clan," she commanded, her voice ringing with power. "The Draconite go to war. And for the first time in 1,000 years, we do not fight alone." The hall erupted in roars and flames and the beating of wings, and Marcus held tight to Cirith's hand and hoped he had not just promised something humanity could not deliver. The Battle of Draconite Prime would be remembered for 10,000 years as the moment everything changed. The hegemony fleet arrived in overwhelming force, 3,000 warships darkening the stars around the Dragon homeworld, each one bristling with weapons designed to burn planets and break civilizations. Against them stood 400 Draconite vessels, magnificent ships that looked like living creatures made of metal and flame, crewed by warriors who had been fighting since before humanity discovered fire. The hegemony commanders expected a brief campaign, perhaps some resistance for the sake of honor before the inevitable surrender, because the numbers simply did not allow for any other outcome. They did not expect the human armada, 200 ships of the Human Confederacy Navy, dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their angular hulls gleaming with fresh paint and their weapons already charging. They were smaller than the hegemony capital ships and less elegant than the Draconite cruisers. Squat and practical vessels built by a species that valued function over beauty. but they were built for one purpose and one purpose only. And humanity had been perfecting the art of war for longer than most species had existed. Marcus commanded from the bridge of the Defiance, a destroyer-class warship that the Confederacy had given him after his role in building the Alliance. And Cirith stood beside him as she had throughout everything. "They are not retreating," she observed, watching the tactical display show thousands of enemy signatures holding position. "They still believe they can win despite our numbers. They do not understand what they are facing," Marcus said. And he opened a fleet-wide communication channel so every human ship could hear him. "All vessels. This is Cole," he said, his voice steady and calm despite the fear hammering in his chest. "Remember why we are here today. Because these people welcomed us as allies. They called us friends. They trusted us to stand beside them when the darkness came." He paused and let those words sink in. "And now someone wants to take that from us. Someone thinks they can threaten our family and face no consequences. And I do not know about the rest of you, but I take that very personally." A chorus of acknowledgments flooded back across the channel. Hundreds of human voices raised in agreement. "So let us show them what happens when you threaten people humans care about," Marcus finished. "Let us show them what we really are." The battle that followed was chaos and fire and death on a scale that defied description. Human vessels dove into the hegemony formation like wolves into a flock, using tactics that bordered on suicidal to get close enough for their weapons to be effective. They used asteroids as cover and rode the shock waves from explosions to boost their speed. They rammed enemy ships and kept firing even as their own hulls tore apart. They performed maneuvers that should have been physically impossible, and somehow survived through sheer stubborn refusal to die, and the Draconai remembered what it meant to be dragons. Their ships screamed through the void like comets, ancient weapon systems unleashing plasma fire that burned hotter than stars. And when the fighting got close enough for boarding actions, the hegemony soldiers found themselves facing creatures of scale and flame who had been apex predators since before their species learned to walk upright. Human and Draconai fought side by side, covering each other and supporting each other. Two species that had been strangers months ago, now moving together like they had been allies for centuries. 6 hours into the battle, the hegemony flagship made its move. The Absolute Authority was the largest warship anyone had ever built. A mobile fortress that could destroy planets and crush fleets single-handedly. And it was burning directly toward Draconai Prime if it reached bombardment range. Nothing could stop it from turning the dragon homeworld to ash. Marcus looked at Cirith, and she looked at him. And they both knew what needed to be done. "Together?" Marcus asked. "Always." She replied. The Defiance broke from formation and burned hard toward the Dreadnought. A single destroyer against a ship that could have held a small city. It was suicide by any rational calculation. But humans had never been particularly rational. Draconai vessels followed without hesitation, drawing fire and clearing a path. And human ships fell in behind to add their weapons to the assault. They hit the Absolute Authority like a spear through armor, targeting engines and weapon systems and command centers. Taking catastrophic damage, but refusing to stop, Marcus flew the ship through hellfire, dodging debris and enemy fire through instinct and luck and sheer unwillingness to fail. While Cirith coordinated attacks with Draconai pilots and human captains alike, the Defiance was burning by the time they reached the Dreadnought's reactor core. Half the crew dead and every system failing. But Marcus pushed the ship forward one last time. The explosion lit up the sky over Draconai Prime like a second sun when the light faded. The Absolute Authority was gone, and with it the hegemony's hope of victory. The enemy fleet scattered and ran, thousands of ships fleeing in every direction, carrying word back to their masters of what happened when you threaten people who had humanity fighting beside them. Marcus came back to consciousness slowly, surrounded by wreckage that had once been the bridge of the Defiance. And the first thing he saw was Cirith's face above him, tears tracking down her scaled cheeks. "You are alive," she breathed. And there was more relief in those words than he had ever heard in any voice. Apparently, he managed. Though speaking hurt in ways he did not want to examine closely. "You flew your ship into the heart of a dreadnought. It worked." "Did it not?" Cirith laughed and cried at the same time. And she pulled him close despite his injuries and held him like she would never let go. "My mother has formally recognized the alliance," she said eventually, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Full partnership between the Draconai and humanity, sealed in blood and fire. And she has extended citizenship to any human who wants it." "That is nice," Marcus said. "But what do you want?" She pulled back enough to look at him, and her amber eyes were soft with emotions. He was only beginning to understand. "I want to see what else we can accomplish together," she said. "I want to learn more about this insane species that throws itself into fire for people it barely knows. And I want to stay with you, Marcus Cole, for as long as you will have me." How does forever sound? Forever is a very long time. "I know," Marcus said. And he smiled despite everything. But humans have never been good at thinking small. She kissed him then. Surrounded by wreckage and death, with the fires of battle still burning in the void outside. And it was perfect, outside the shattered viewport. Draconai Prime gleamed like a jewel saved from destruction. And human and Draconai ships moved together through the debris field. Beginning the long work of rescue and recovery, a new era was dawning in the galaxy. Born from an alliance no one had expected. Between an ancient species that had forgotten how to hope and a young species that refused to accept impossible odds, the universe had seen many empires and many wars and many moments that seemed like they would last forever. But it had never seen anything quite like this partnership, and perhaps that was the most human thing of all. The refusal to accept limitations and the determination to build something new and beautiful, even in the aftermath of destruction. Marcus held Cirith close and watched the stars. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, the dragon and the human. The princess and the cargo hauler, bound together by fire and stubbornness and love, and that was only the beginning of their story.